Listo, les dejo la sesión. Ya se está transmitiendo en vivo por si gustan comenzar.
Hola, muchas gracias. Vamos a empezar con el bloque de presentación
Perfecto.
en línea y vamos a empezar entonces con la presentación de Yaeji Baek de la Universidad de Oaxaca.
Bueno, do I start? Okay, I will start. It is my pleasure to present in the symposium. Have we had a coffee today? I have. It is the exam season in Oxford, so coffee should be our best friends now. Today I'll talk about coffee produced in Mexico, particularly in Oaxaca. Coffee is a commodity that is largely consumed in global north and exclusively consumed in produced by global south. 95% of coffee users in Mexico are from indigenous communities. 60% of producers are smallholders. However, in Oaxaca, they are not even small, rather micro or nano, using less than 1 hectare to 3 hectares maximum. And then 96% of coffee produced in Mexico is Arabica. Why does it matter? Arabica has higher quality compared to Robusta, so specialty coffee is Arabica. But Arabica is also more susceptible to climate-related diseases such as the notorious coffee leaf rust. It is also worth pointing out that migration increased by 19% in Mexico's top coffee-producing state, such as Veracruz, Chiapas, Oaxaca, and Puebla. Throughout my research, I question visibility. How do institutional frameworks, here specialty coffee market, state programs, and local organizations construct the visibility and value of labor, knowledge, and ecological care in smallholder coffee farming in Oaxaca? And how do these constructions shape sustainability practices and narratives? It is a quantitative research that is mostly conducted through an ethnographic fieldwork, which I am conducting now. I have been working with and in different coffee villages in with northern and southern highlands in Oaxaca. It is how coffee is grown in Oaxaca in agroforestry system. It is beautiful. However, it also means that farmers have to walk by hours for food, as most of them have no car or means of transportation. It also means that they have to carry their harvest on their back. Oaxaca has very limited arable land for industrial type farming, and coffee allows them to produce crops to sustain their lives and allows us to enjoy high quality ecological coffee.
I'm sorry, Yaeji.
However,
Sorry to interrupt, but the presentation seems to be stuck in the first slide.
I've been moving. So you haven't seen any other slide after first?
No, only see the first slide.
I don't know what's the matter. I've been moving several. Still, do you see only the first slide?
Yes, it's still the first slide. You can share it again? Try it again, please.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
I think she's having problems with the connection.
Yeah, we expect Yaeji to come back. Let's bear in mind that she's doing her fieldwork right now in Mexico, and she will connection. Let's hope she can get back.
Everyone, can anybody confirm if people can see the slide, please?
We're seeing the second slide, coffee production in Mexico. If you try to move.
Yes, station.
Well, you know what we can do, because we can't hear you right now. Maybe we can move on to the next presentation and try to circle back to you at the end. If you can maybe try to connection issue in the meantime. Is that all right?
Yaeji is having problems with the connection. Okay, we can move to the next participant.
Right, can we move on then, in the meantime, with Ashlyn Anderson from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, if you're ready now.
Hi everyone. I'm just checking you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. I will go ahead and pull up my slides.
We can see you, but can you share your screen now? We can see.
Yep. Yes, I will share my screen. Okay. Thank you. I'm glad you can hear me well. Confirming that you can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So let's see, I'll do view slideshow. All right. Well, hello everyone. Hola a todos y todas. So good to be here with you virtually. My name is Ashlyn Anderson. I am here to present some of my master's thesis research from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And the title of my presentation is Exploring the Right to Food in Mexico, a policy analysis of the general law on adequate and sustainable food. So I want to begin by just centering in some of my own positionality and identity, as well as some of the origins of this research. So my background is actually nutrition and public health. So I did studies in the US for my undergraduate in food security and public health nutrition. And then that really inspired a lot of my thoughts around food security being something that is systemic. It's nutrition and food. It's not just about what you eat, but rather the systems around it. And that was really affirmed by my time spent in Mexico, where I received a Fulbright grant and was living and working in Puebla. And that experience really informed a lot of this research today, which is coming from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, where I studied a master's in nutrition for global health. And it was through being at LSHTM and through living in Mexico that I was exposed to this concept of the right to food, or derecho a la alimentación in Spanish. And really this question of what does a right to food mean for nutrition? So moving forward to the background of this research, first I want to define the right to food, or derecho a la alimentación. So the right to food is a universally recognized human right, actually enshrined in key international legal instruments, including Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Article 11 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. The right to food affirms all people at all times must have physical and economic access to adequate, nutritious, and culturally acceptable food in ways that are sustainable and dignified. So I mentioned the ICESCR, and in 1981, Mexico became a state party to this group. But it wasn't until 2011 that the Chamber of Deputies in Mexico actually approved an article into the Constitution that established that every person has the right to nutritious, sufficient, and quality food. The state will guarantee it. And that's a pretty powerful statement, right? This has been in Article 4 of the Mexican Constitution since 2011. But what I want to highlight here as part of this background is that despite having the right to food as a legally binding commitment in the Constitution, population nutrition statistics have gotten worse. So while there has been progress on reducing chronic undernutrition, like childhood stunting and wasting, the prevalence of nutrition-related chronic diseases, or NCDs, has actually become more apparent in the recent years. So the rates of obesity are almost 40% among adults, and Mexico has one of the highest prevalences of childhood obesity across Latin America. So again, it's the juxtaposition of what does the right to food mean in the context of these very challenging health and nutrition statistics. So this idea of having the right to food in the Constitution actually garnered a lot of attention. In 2011, there were plenty of articles and reports from the United Nations, as well as other bodies, that said this is a giant step forward for Mexico. So from 2011, 14 years later, we see, 13 years later, in 2024, the approval of a law to put the right to food into action. And the law is called the Ley General de Alimentación Adecuada y Sostenible, or the General Law for Adequate and Sustainable Food. And the approval of this law was recognized as a historic achievement for Mexico's food system, not just nutrition, but food system, to strengthen the ways that the government was supporting the provision of adequate and sustainable food. And so you can see here just a couple of the articles that came out of the news of this law, and how civil society, government, and academia came together to not only push this law forward, but actually bring it into passage. So again, this is last year in April, and I had the honor of doing my thesis research at the same time. So it was coinciding exactly at the moment of deciding my thesis research topic and choosing to focus the project on the passage of this law. So that brings me to the title of the research, which is The Right to Adequate Food in Mexico, a policy analysis on the general law for adequate and sustainable food. So the aim of this research is to really examine the policy formulation process of the Ley General. From now on, I'll call it the Ley General, as it's called in Spanish, as well as stakeholders' perceptions on the right to food, and finally, implications of the law for addressing malnutrition. And the methods I used were twofold. It was the policy document review as well as stakeholder interviews with key stakeholders involved in the policy processes of the law, as well as expert knowledge of the food system in Mexico. And here you can see just a schematic of the methods that I use. So again, you see this two-part process of the documentary review, as well as qualitative interviews with stakeholders. And the interview guide with stakeholders was informed by something called the policy triangle, which is a policy framework from Walt and Gibson. And there were kind of three elements of the interview guide. It was the policy formulation of the law, including the context, content, and process. Stakeholders' perceptions on the right to adequate food, what does it mean to them? As well as the implementation of the law and implications for nutrition. So I want to just briefly summarize who I got to interview. So I actually did 13 interviews with stakeholders in Mexico. They were all taking place over Zoom and in Spanish, with 4 different sectors. So 5 interviews with government officials, 2 interviews with academics, 3 interviews with civil society organizations, and 2 interviews with international organizations such as the Food and Agriculture Organization, where I'm currently working here in Rome. So I want to really dive in and spend the rest of the time here talking about some of the results. So there were some really rich data, some themes and sub-themes that came from these policy interviews, as well as the document analysis. So for the sake of time, I'll just cover the last 3. So the first one I want to talk about is theme 2, which is enabling and constraining factors to the policy formulation of the law. So again, enabling factors, meaning what is enabling its passage, what helped its realization, as well as constraining factors and things that made it difficult in the policy formulation process. So one of the first enabling factors I want to share is the international collaboration and regional leadership of Mexico in the preparation for this law. So Mexico was actually part of the Frente Parlamentario, so the Parliamentary Front Against Hunger in Latin America and the Caribbean. And through this group, they were exposed, the Mexican government used a framework law on the right to food and food sovereignty. So this is just to say that this law, again, didn't come out of nowhere. It didn't come from overnight, but there was a framework law on the right to food that was utilized by the Mexican government. And you can see this in the quote of a stakeholder. We were no longer proposing a law with unknown results, but we had evidence of it in other countries with more or less similar circumstances. And you can see that very clearly here on this map, which was developed to show where in Latin America are there already countries that recognize the right to food in their constitution. And you can see this here, that countries across Latin America have already done this. So that was something that was enabling in the formulation of this law. Next, I want to move to the constraining factors. So the constraining factors mainly were the contentions of the food industry in the formulation of this law. What was interesting is that all 13 stakeholders mentioned the food industry, but they disagreed. There was various views on the degree of participation of the food industry. And widely, industry actors were recognized as a threat to public health and nutrition in Mexico. And this is seen very evidently in the example of Coca-Cola interfering in food and public health and nutrition, as well as other major food corporations. And you can see this in the quote from government. So despite these favorable conditions, the Ley General encountered opposition and resistance from business groups and corporations linked to food systems. They have advocated that there be no regulation or transformation in food systems, but in the approval process, these interest groups found an ally in the Ministry of Agriculture. So I want to move now to theme 3, which is what is the understanding of the derecho a la alimentación among stakeholders, and what are the implications for nutrition? So one of the stakeholders' perceptions on the right to adequate food, what's its ability to connect with environmental sustainability. And what was interesting is that thinking about the derecho a la alimentación, not just as a food issue, but as a larger food systems issue, and the need to basically address the food system in order to apply adequate nutrition. So you can see this from a civil society member. They said nutrition in the law means guaranteeing that the right to food involves food be produced in a sustainable way, and that implies questioning the production models we have. And I want to make a brief note here that's really important. Linguistically, alimentación is not directly translated to food, right? So even in Spanish, saying derecho a la alimentación goes deeper than just a right to food. It is involving the ownership elements. It's involving the nourishment element. And so that's really important to notice when you're thinking about the conceptualization of this among stakeholders. And then the last perception I want to share of the right to adequate food is its connection with food security and food sovereignty. So many of you have probably heard of seguridad alimentaria and food sovereignty as well. And many of the stakeholders did not make a distinction, but rather saw that the right to adequate food, food sovereignty, and food security are highly interlinked. However, there was some stakeholders, specifically from government and academia, that did note the distinctiveness of these concepts. I want to read this quote from government official. They said, I think that they are related, but not the same. Because food security for me, derecho a la seguridad alimentaria, is having access to, right? I'm going to be able to eat. The difference here is what you are going to be able to eat, right? I can have food security if I have availability of many ultra-processed foods. So again, this is making that distinction that a right to food actually goes slightly farther than just saying food security. It's involving that ownership and that the right for an individual to actually take part in the food system and care about the types of foods that they have access to. So the third and final theme that I want to touch on here is the future implementation of the law. And here are some of the sub-themes here as well described on the page. So the future implementation really revolved around the contention in defining the role of the state. So all 13 stakeholders actually commented that the state is the primary duty bearer for the right to food. So when you talk about who's responsible for the derecho a la alimentación, all 13 stakeholders said the state. But there was various views when it came to what are the specific responsibilities of the state and what are the legal obligations. So some government stakeholders said that the role of the state was to prioritize increasing economic individual capacity to buy nutritious food, while some other stakeholders talked about the role of the state is actually providing that nutritious food. So you can see from this particular government official, they believed that the role of the state is to facilitate access to not just provide food, but to provide the economic opportunities for people to have jobs, to afford food, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll read this quote. The role of the government is to facilitate access to food, not produce it. Our function is not to distribute food or give food to people, but to create the conditions so that people have a sufficient income and have food available in the place where each family lives. So you can see where this contention and what the role of the state is can actually develop a lot of issues when it comes to the policy implementation. But again, this research was focused on the policy formulation part. So I want to wrap up here as for the sake of time. I'll just provide one more example. Another of the themes was the importance of the regulation process. And the regulation process is the process after a law is passed. And this is considered a key opportunity for monitoring what does the law actually do in practice, and what are the statistical mechanisms and monitoring systems that we can put in place. And really, the stakeholders saw that the regulation process was a way to translate the legal framework into tangible benefits for individuals to demonstrate how a right to adequate food can impact nutrition. And I want to end with this quote from civil society. This law does not mean something in the lives of ordinary people. All the work that has been invested will not reach where we want it to go. So I think through this process, meaning the regulation process, we have the moment and the responsibility to be able to push for this law to have a concrete effect on people's lives. So I want to end here with some key takeaways. First is the need in the law to leverage the enabling factors. So it's very clear, as you saw in the first slides, that the creation of this intersectoral working group and the leadership across Latin America, that Mexico was not alone in developing a right to food law, really helped enable the policy formulation of this right to food law. There's also the takeaway that there is a strong and critical need to define the role of the state, which basically determines whether the role of the state is to create the enabling environment or intervene to provide food. And this is something that the government is currently examining right now. It's also really important to understand the conceptualization of the right to adequate food and what it means to stakeholders, because what it means to stakeholders can actually influence the law's ability to realize its goals. And so that was actually one of the most interesting elements is asking stakeholders, what does the derecho a la alimentación mean to you, and what does it mean for the broader food system changes needed to address malnutrition? And finally, as the law is now over a year old, right? This happened in April of 2024. We're now in June of 2025. It's really important to understand how to overcome the barriers to implementation of this law. And as we saw on the last slide, the regulation process is essential to verify and add additional transparency mechanisms, as well as alignment with other food policies that currently exist, such as the food labeling, the school meals program, as well as other really critical food policies. So I will just end here for the sake of time, and these are my references. And I'll just say muchísimas gracias. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for allowing me to join in online. I'm currently based in Rome, but there are plenty of collaborations to come back to London. And please enjoy some of these food photos from Puebla. I couldn't help it. The gastronomy is amazing there. And please reach out to my email with any additional questions. So thank you all so much. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ashlyn. That was wonderful. Maybe at the very end of the blog at 6 or a bit past after 6, maybe we can have some questions from the audience here or from YouTube, so you can stick around for that. Now we're moving on to Mónica Salvador from London School of Economics. Thank you very much for joining us.
Sure, hello everyone. Trying to share my screen. Give me just a couple of seconds here. Just gonna share it all to make it easier. Can you see it now? Thank you. Okay. Well, thanks again, everyone. Having such a nice afternoon, evening already. Well, yeah, I'm Mónica. I'm part of the Master in Local Economic Development here at LSE. And well, I'm going to talk to you about a problematic related with the NENIs, women labor force in Mexico. Disclaimer, the project is still ongoing, so we're not going to see a lot of the results, but I want to focus a lot on the problematic. I think it's a lot of information that we can build just based on this. So the topic is NENIs in Mexico, caught between economic empowerment and the gender work trap. And I want to start, just for those who don't know, just for all of us, reminding who are the NENIs, basics. So the NENIs is actually now an acronym, well, an acronym, because we gave it the meaning after it came out, that holds for a new internet business entrepreneur. These women who sell their stuff in online marketplace, in Facebook, via WhatsApp, through their close friends or even extended network, and products like beauty, healthcare products, clothes, food, even, and whatever they can produce or they can afford. And now it's raising falls especially after the pandemic. They have been increasing a lot in numbers. It was a boom of NENIs after a pandemic, almost an increase of 70%, and they're in demographic terms, they're women around 20, mainly 54 years old, that are digitalized. They have an access to the cell phone at least, because as I mentioned, they sell all the products online via these commercial social channels. So why is that important for us, and what should we be caring more about in NENIs? Well, it's now what we're doing, but we need to care more. First of all, because Mexico's country is really left behind in terms of women labor's participation. We are the second lowest country in participation from the countries on the OECD. I think it's the fifth in Latin America, and also because most of these women are earning, increasing their earnings through this type of model, and also have been increasing a lot the participation in the retail sales, goods and services. So they're almost the participation is almost around 10% of it all. So it's very interesting what is happening with them, and also because we're not having a lot of programs, we're not allowed to raising amount of government programs focused on NENIs, but for what I'm going to explain you later, probably we're not doing this in the best way, so we need to start to focus and adapt the efforts in a better, yes, a better way. And linked with this, by the way, last year, 2024, there was the first actually research released by the government, and a lot of people participated and involved, where even the Secretary of Economy mentioned this, right? Like how they are very important for us, for the economy, for all the people who's involved, and then there are households, a lot of children and caring people involved that account for their earnings. But that we need to, what I said is we need to celebrate that, because the effort they're doing is double and triple. And it's like, yeah, it is, but to what extent is that like something to be celebrated or something to be understanding, and where does it come from? And I want to start again taking these three important statistics for us to start to get a little bit deeper. And the first one is where all these women come from, right? Most of them come from very poor municipalities, over 88% from very low social backgrounds, where usually you don't have enough formal jobs opportunities. Just there to move something with that, something that we need to pay attention there. Another thing is most of them are mothers. They have at least one children, up to 50% have even 2-3 children. So it's also important to consider, and then why they're taking these jobs, but also for this type of entrepreneurship model, but also what other conditions under they are practicing it. And as well, the important thing to consider is all the structural violences they're going through this and how they're practicing this model, because of course, we have the counterpart of the NENIs, the men who sell online. We are also the same amount of people, 1.2 million of men selling online, but usually the conditions are very different, and the opportunities of these structural biases they live are not the same. For example, in the case of NENIs, even the name, right? The name came from a mockery online, where people would say like making fun of the looks, making fun of the way, even how they present themselves or how they sell, and how they regain and their power through the name. But even from there, we can see there's something different going on. And also even in the security that allows them or don't allow them to sell their products, we can see this pickup points has been come very trendy between them. And it is yes, because they sell online and they have then a point to sell this stuff, but also because it's a way for them to be secure. Like most of them, even I think the picture in the middle is from the Cuernavaca market. They decide to sell the stuff in the sunlight and during days in a specific span of the daytime, so they can be more safe. We know Mexico is not known as a very safe country for women, so that's all of the things that we need to consider, how this can impede or be a barrier for this type of business to develop. So considering all these statistics is where I start to wonder, well, is economic actually what we're talking about, economic empowerment and something we need to give a lot of money and invest in, or is actually a gender workshop we're talking about here, right? This is where my work has been started, and I don't want to overwhelm you with all the theoretical background I'm working on, but I want to bring you some key theoretical concepts for us to consider and for you to understand where the studies and interviews I'm starting to do are heading to, and which are first one, the dimension of the labor market-based understanding, which is labor theory, which is the understanding of the unemployment trap and the work trap. The unemployment trap, which is how all this, what the type of barriers of things are stopping them to enter the formal, in this case, formal job. And we have to do what we saw before, right? The children, they have to do even the caring job, not only for the children in general, the commuting, the opportunities they have to education, to overcome on their skills, blah, blah, a lot of things, right? And also the work trap. There are now, when they start selling through the NENI model, right? You can romanticize it and say it's the best way because they are self-helping themselves, but is it actually the best way? And is it actually allowing them to growth in the medium long term? So just a question there that I'm trying to put on the table. Another dimension fundamental here to have in consideration is the entrepreneurship theory. In this case, the romanticization again, but it's around all of this nowadays in the world of Elon Musk's and Richard Branson's and these people who have well, not even them, but I don't know, Zuckerberg, that have become rich very quickly. We think the entrepreneurship is especially in policy making, the solution for everything. It's a way for people to self-help themselves again and get out of poverty. But numbers suggest otherwise. I mean, of course, it's an interesting tool, but usually the type of profile of people who overcome in this type of model come from high-tech industries or have a lot of venture capital or capital in general to support their businesses. And that in terms of their success that the business can have, but also in terms of the amount of jobs that actually an entrepreneurship can generate, in this case of micro-entrepreneurship, even about the wage generation amount of wage you can have from it. In this case, for example, we have some data explaining how usually most of the new firms, at least on the first 1 to 5 years, have earnings of less than 28% of a regular job. And in the case of NENIs, specifically in Mexico, how their earnings that are doing nowadays are lower than the minimum wage in Mexico. So another thing to nuance we need to take in consideration. And last but not least, very important, the dimension, the gender dimension of all of this, how we know we have in Mexico a huge problem of job gap between men and women, how usually, not only in earnings in this case, how women earn less than men, but a lot of, again, intersectional things as well that cross between the genders in the job market. And also the unpaid work, of course, involved on it, right? As we mentioned before, they are usually very in charge of the household chores, the childcare and all that. So to what extent are they doing this from out of, we call as well in entrepreneurship theory, out of necessity or out of as an opportunity? Okay, so that's a part of the things we are having in mind. And I think I'm reaching the time I have allowed. So I just want to end up saying this, which are the main focus on and their aim of the research and the key questions I'm having here. So as I've explained the problematic before, what I want to do is what I'm doing now through the interviews. I'm interviewing NENIs and some people involved in policy making of these projects we have in Mexico, is to create Ecology a breakdown of this phenomenon. I'm not saying, I know I bring you all the bad side of a very pessimistic perspective of it now. I'm not saying maybe we need to exterminate this type of model, probably not, but maybe we need to do a very, very specific approach through it and consider all these nuances again. So I want to start by understanding this phenomenon more in depth, considering all of the points I mentioned before, but also try to focus in the policy making and the recommendations and how we need to bring the support. So, again, it's not only through money. Some of the programs are giving as well training and skill development for these profiles, but is that enough again? Or how can we assess also this structural gender gap problems in the process if possible? So, well, this is most of it. As well, if you have any questions, please let me know. At the end, we can talk further about this. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Monica. That was very interesting and relevant to the discussions we had earlier here at the Symposium. We may have some questions at the end, but now we're moving on to Gabriela Castrono. She's from the Universidad Autónoma de Puebla. If you can join us now.
Yes, thank you. Okay, I will share my presentation.
We can see it now, if you just want to go maybe full screen mode.
Yes. Okay. I apologize, I couldn't connect my camera, but yes, I will present. It is okay. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. My name is Gabriela Elizabeth Casolariano, a student of the Masters in Microbiological Science at Benemérita Universidad Autónoma de Puebla. And today I will present the progress of my work, evaluation of chimeric recombinant proteins as vaccines against Trypanosoma cruzi. Just to clarify, this work is still ongoing. Okay, so yes. To begin, I would like to talk you about Chagas disease. It is also known as American trypanomiasis and is listed as one of the 20 neglected tropical diseases in the Americas by the World Health Organization. It is primarily transmitted by threatening bugs, commonly known in Mexico as kissing bugs, which are infected with the Trypanosoma cruzi parasite. However, Trypanosoma cruzi can also be transmitted by consumption of food or beverage contaminated with Trypanosoma cruzi. For example, contact with feces or urine of infected triatomine bugs or common opossums. It can also be transmitted during pregnancy or childbirth through blood or blood products transfusions and through transplants of some organs such as heart or kidney. Chagas disease presents in two phases. The initial acute phase lasts for about 2 months after infection, although a high number of parasites can circulate in the blood. In most cases, symptoms are absent or mild and non-specific, like fever, headache, muscle pain, difficult in breathing, or abdominal or chest pain. And then during the chronic phase, the parasites are hidden mainly in the heart and digestive muscles. 1 to 3 decades after infection, up to 3 of patients suffer from cardiac disorders, and up to 1 in 10 suffer from digestive, neurological, or mixed alterations. In later years, these patients may experience the damage to the nervous system and muscles of the heart and digestive system, leading to cardiac arrhythmias, progressive heart failure, and sudden death. Okay, so now talking about Chagas by the numbers, Chagas disease is found mainly in endemic areas of 21 continental Latin American countries, where transmission is largely related to the presence of the insect vector. Today, more than 100 million people are considered at risk of infection. More than 7 million people worldwide are estimated to be infected with Trypanosoma cruzi, leading to more than 10,000 deaths every year. Currently, currently there is no vaccine to prevent this disease. In Mexico, this represents a public health problem, as 2/3 of the country has ideal conditions for vector-borne transmission. Today, various vaccination strategies has been developed, including the use of nucleic acids, protein subunits, attenuated vaccines, and nanoparticles, which have shown promising results in murine models. Among the most relevant proposals are vaccines based on recombinant proteins, but however, a vaccine does not exist. So in this context, our work focuses in 5 particular objectives. First, design chimeric peptides capable of activating the major histocompatibility complex, MHC1 and MHC2, model the biophysical and thermodynamic properties of the chimeric peptides using computational tools, clone and express the commercial synthesized chimeric peptides, purify the chimeric peptides to homogeneity using nickel affinity chromatography, and evaluate the humoral and cellular immune response generated by immunization with the chimeric peptides. So today I will present the in silico results obtained with different bioinformatic tools. First, two hypothetical chimeric proteins were generated, specifically target to MHC1. This chimeric peptide contains 121 amino acids, and the chimeric peptide 2 contains 119 amino acids aimed at inducing Th1 and Th2 immune response, respectively. These structures predicted by AlphaFold 2 were refined using mold probability, achieving structural models with clash scores below 2, indicating a high conformational quality for subsequent analysis. Then progressive molecular docking process were performed using tools such as HDoc and AMBER24, allowing for the selection of representative models based on interaction strength and structural stability. Through the 250 nanoseconds molecular dynamic simulation, a consistent number of native contacts was preserved, while a reduction in non-native contacts was observed. This indicates the progressive structural stabilization of the protein receptor complexes over time and supports the specificity of the predicted interactions. The most promising complexes were selected based on the number of hydrogen bonds predicted by PDB-Sum and later validated through molecular dynamics simulations, as we can see in the graphics. Then, in the time of the simulation showed a stable RMSD values, along with a consistent number of native contacts and hydrogen bonds, suggesting a stable and biological relevant interaction. Binding free energies were calculated, supporting thermodynamically favorable interactions between the TLR2 and TLR4 receptors and their respective chimeric ligands. We performed the same steps with the same bioinformatic tools and analysis with the chimeric peptide 2. I want to say that to validate the interaction behavior observed in the chimeric protein receptor systems, two crystallized structures from non-ligand receptor complexes, TLR2 and TLR4 respectively, were retrieved from the protein data bank and used as positive controls. These reference complexes were subject to the same simulation conditions as the experimental models, and their inclusion allowed for comparative analysis or interaction stability, hydrogen bonding patterns, and native contact preservation, serving as a benchmark for evaluating the biological relevance and accuracy of the predicted chimeric complex. And these are my references, and that will be all for me, but if you have any questions, please let me know, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. We're now moving on to the presentation also from a student at the Universidad Autónoma de Puebla, Pablo Díaz Hernández.
Okay, let me share my presentation. Okay, now should be see it. Can you confirm me? please.
Yeah, we can see it all right. If you just want to go full screen mode, maybe.
Right. Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pablo Díaz Hernandez. I'm an undergraduate student at WAP. Today, I will share with you some advances of my final project and their importance. The name's title is Outer Membrane Vesicles as Nanoparticles of Clinical Interest. Okay, both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria can secrete extracellular bacterial extracellular vesicles. The difference lies in their origin. From cytoplasmic membrane for the gram-positive, laser, for the gram-positive bacteria, and from the outer membrane for gram-negative bacteria. Yeah, I take a deep focus on outer membrane vesicles because my bacteria is gram-negative. And about their cargo, the cargo is the molecules or nucleic acids contained inside the OMBs. The main difference between the outer membrane vesicles and membrane vesicles is for example, the membrane proteins, or in this case, and the outer membrane proteins, of the presence of the periplasmic proteins for the outer membranes, or the lipopolysaccharide in this case, and the presence of lipoproteins, for this example. And at this point, do you know what can we do with these little nanoparticles? Some potential applications are listed here. For natural OMBs, I mean, just the OMBs or membrane vesicles, they serve as a DNA, RNA, antibody or antigen carriers, and also as a delivery vehicle for natural cargos. But what about the engineering OMBs? In this case, we can loading cargos inside the OMB lumen, like here. We can warping nanoparticles inside the OMB, and also we can embedding the desired components with the outer membrane layer, as I show in this figure. Right. The bacterial membrane vesicles have two phases. For example, in metabolism, the enzymes contained in their cargo allows to participate in metabolic process. Or one is in cell interactions. They serve as effective delivery vehicle for signaling molecules. Outer membrane vesicles enable a bacterial survival mainly by breakdown and sequestration of antimicrobial molecules. This one can contribute bacterial mechanism defense as the biofilm. Also, they contain a virulence factor. But what about the biomedical applications? These nanoparticles, natural or modified, could serve as nanopharmaceuticals based on their desired characteristics in variety of biomedical applications, such as antibacterial adaptations, cancer immunotherapy, adjuvants, or one of the most important, vaccines. Right, about my bacteria, Klebsiella pneumoniae. Klebsiella pneumoniae belongs to Enterobacteriaceae family, and is described as gram-negative, encapsulated, and non-motile bacterium. The principal human environments that these bacteria can colonize are the gastrointestinal tract and the mucosal surface of the oropharynx. The virulence of these bacteria is provided by a wide array of factors such as the capsule, polysaccharide capsule, the presence of lipopolysaccharide, fimbrias. This one is for attach itself to the host cells, and pseudophores. Klebsiella pneumoniae is responsible for up to 85% of nosocomial infections in Mexico. Its impact is also reflected in UK, where Klebsiella species caused more than 7,000 cases of bacteremia in 2017. Okay, about the methodology of this project, Klebsiella pneumoniae was insulated from a hospital environment with a multi-drug resistant characteristic. Therefore, a stress condition was generated to induce the OMB secretions. Once OMBs were purified, we characterized them through different assays, such as immunofluorescence, biofilm, a transferase assay using Ecology DH5 alpha, and a quantification by Bradford. Right, about my results. At the first one, I made an antibiotic-resistant test of Klebsiella pneumoniae. I used 12 antibiotics from gram-negative bacteria, and here's the results of the test. From 12 antibiotics, Klebsiella pneumoniae was resistant to two of them. Those ones are ampicillin and carbamazepine. Yeah, it's what I expected because those antibiotics belongs to beta-lactam class. And yeah, Klebsiella pneumoniae produces extended spectrum beta-lactamases to drive these antibiotics to degradation. Yeah. Here is a modified gram staining of the bacteria and their OMBs. And the first one is just bacteria Klebsiella pneumoniae. Yeah, here's the comparison of size, because in red square there's a Klebsiella pneumoniae, and in the white rectangle there's their OMBs, and 1, 2, 3. And yeah, I'm not sure if you can see it in this one, but trust me, here's the OMBs. One, there are 2 of them, and yeah, 1. Okay. Next one is the immunofluorescence assays. We performed this assay to study the release of outer membrane vesicles directly from the bacteria. We used 2 treatments. The first one was with Triton 1X100 to allow to membrane permeabilization. The second one is we use a BSA, or bovine serum albumin protein. This assay was performed because to blocking the non-specific antibody binding. Yeah, we use antibodies from mice. All right, our one is biofilm assays. As we know, the biofilm is a bacterial mechanism of defense. We compared the biofilm formed by Klebsiella pneumoniae and by E. coli DH5 alpha. Both bacteria were induced with different concentration of outer membrane vesicles. Yeah, Klebsiella pneumoniae shows more robust and structured biofilm formation, like in this case, at 48 hours to E. coli is right here. You can see the difference. While E. coli presents a structure is looser and more dispersed. Yeah. So now we can say that these OMBs hide the increase the formation of biofilm. And the last one is a transference assay. In this case, for this experiment, we evaluate the ability of outer membrane vesicles to transfer resistant genes. As I show in the table 1, Klebsiella pneumoniae was resistant to 2 antibiotics. So using E. coli DH5 alpha, which is not resistant to any antibiotics, we proved that resistance was transferred. Here's the results of this antibiotic sensitive test of E. coli DH5 alpha induced with Klebsiella pneumoniae OMBs. And we use ampicillin, carbamazepine, and ceftaloin. And here's the resistant and morally sensitive and these results prove that. So what we know with these results, first one is Klebsiella pneumoniae can secrete OMBs around to 10.65 micrograms per 5 microliters. Okay. Stress conditions like metabolic stress favors the secretion of OMBs. Also, E. coli DH5 alpha transforming is induced by OMBs, acquired the resistance to the same antibiotics to the Klebsiella pneumoniae. Also, this favors the biofilm generation, biofilm. Yeah, other characteristics is that it increased in size. This is my project. I brought some new objectives, further research in my project. And some of them are identification of resistant genes by PCR, and from the outer membrane vesicles, we need to obtain total protein extracts to make a SDS page and a Western blot. Also, we want to do proteomics of these nanoparticles through the simograms and obtain the content of metalloproteins, presence of metalloproteins, sorry. And finally, my conclusions. These advances and preliminary results could provide information of the microbial physiology of Klebsiella pneumoniae and the immunogenic and virulent potential of its outer membrane vesicles. Yeah, OMBs have to proven be available candidates for a wide variety of biomedical applications. I have through biotechnology solutions, we complement the basis for understanding of bacterial resistance in pathogenic bacteria such as Klebsiella pneumoniae. That is from my part. Thank you very much.
Very much for your talk, Pablo. We'll let you know if there are any questions at the end. Some already came through. But yeah, we're going to move on then to the last of the WAP students. Please receive Jimena Orozco.
Hello, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
All right.
To go full screen.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jimena Orozco, and I'm an undergraduate student in biotechnology at Benemérita Universidad Autónoma de Puebla. I'm so excited to be here today. I'm going to talk about my project, formulation of cost-effective probiotic supplements, utilizing indigenous microorganisms from pulque to promote digestive health. This is an ongoing project, and the formulation of probiotic supplement is our long-term goal. So you probably wouldn't expect a slimy, frothy, slightly sour drink to hold the key to digestive health. But for centuries, indigenous communities in Mexico have been drinking exactly that, pulque. As a symbol of Mexican identity, its production and consumption form a key part of the country's intangible cultural heritage, passed down through generations via kinship and oral tradition. However, the economic decline of the 20th century and the influx of foreign capital, particularly from the brewing industry, significantly impacted the pulque trade. Efforts to discredit its shifted consumer preferences towards beer, nearly wiping out large-scale production. Today, it exists mostly through self-consumption and small-scale sales. Although a resurgence of interest in artisanal production is emerging, driven by growing global demands for healthy and functional foods. But what makes pulque important beyond its cultural value? To answer that question, we must understand how pulque is made. Pulque comes from the sap of maguey, called aguamiel. Extracted from several agave species, the fermentation of aguamiel can occur spontaneously, relying on the natural microbiota present in the agave sap, or it can be induced with a previously prepared pulque inoculum, referred to as seed, pie de pulque, or also chastle. When we take a closer look, we find that the microbiological composition of pulque is highly diverse and complex, with lactic acid bacteria and yeast being the dominant groups. Production practices, agave species, sap quality, and the region can highly influence the fermentation process and the diversity of microbial communities. The importance of lactic acid bacteria in pulque lies in the probiotic potential. Probiotics are live microorganisms that provide health benefits to the host when consumed in adequate amounts. In the case of pulque, several lactic acid bacteria strains have shown promising probiotic properties, including potential connections to psychobiotics, a relatively new class of probiotics. Psychobiotics are capable of influencing cognitive function, learning, and mood regulation, in part of interacting with the gut-brain axis in ways similar to neurotransmitters and neuroactive proteins. One group of these bacteria that plays a key role in fermented foods are the most widely used of genus of lactic acid bacteria, Lactobacillus. In the production of fermented, it's very common in the production of fermented foods and have demonstrated extensive properties and benefits for the consumer. For example, other studies, like those by Dr. Maria Elena Sanchez Prado in Mexico, noted that the microencapsulation enhances the antioxidant capacity of the Lactobacillus brevis, that it's a type of strain of Lactobacillus, aiding in cell protection and disease prevention, including cancer. This is an example of how probiotics in vitro may inhibit cancer cells proliferation by up to 40%. My project focuses on isolating, concentrating, and preserving lactic acid bacteria from pulque using Man rugosa sharp medium, which only allows these lactic acid bacteria to determine the best candidates for use as probiotic bacteria in their subsequent identification by molecular methods to identify the most promising probiotic candidates from pulque. We are conducting a rigorous testing on isolated lactic acid bacteria strains. This includes assessing their viability under simulated stomach and vial conditions, evaluating potential antibiotic resistance, and testing their ability to form biofilms. And these steps are essential to determine their suitability for future probiotic applications. Building upon these findings, our ultimate goal is to formulate a cost-effective probiotic supplement using selected indigenous pulque strains, thus providing an accessible health solution for rural communities in Puebla that doesn't have access to these types of supplements easily. And that's how I wanted to share it. That's what I have to share with you for now. But if you have questions, I'm gladly willing to answer all of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimena. We'll circle back and let you know. Right now, let's go back to Yaeji. We had some issues at the beginning, but let's hope we can see the presentation now.
Hello, yes, can you share the presentation, please? Because from the UNAM, they were going to share my screen.
One moment, please. Déjame volver a ingresar porque no puedo compartir mi pantalla.
Let's just give it a moment to see the organizers. There you go. Thank you.
Ready? Can you see my screen?
Yes. Okay, thank you. So it is my pleasure to present in this symposium. So I even had to come to the city from the village for a better internet connection for this presentation, but apparently it wasn't enough. So I apologize about for my presentation with the camera off. So I'll start my presentation. Coffee is deeply infiltrated in our lives. Today, I'll talk about coffee, particularly in Mexico, particularly in Oaxaca. Did you know that Mexico produced and still produces a significant amount and quality of coffee. Coffee is a commodity that is largely consumed in the global north, but exclusively produced in the global south. Next, please. Just before, yes, thank you. 95% of coffee producers in Mexico are from indigenous communities, and 60% of producers are smallholders. However, in Oaxaca, they are not even small, rather micro or nano, producing less than 1 hectare to 2-3 hectares maximum. And then 96% of coffee produced in Mexico is Arabica. Why does it matter? Arabica has higher quality compared to Robusta, so specialty coffee is Arabica. However, Arabica is also more susceptible to climate-related diseases such as the notorious coffee leaf rust. It is also worth pointing out that migration increased by 19% in Mexico's top coffee producing states such as Veracruz, Chiapas, Oaxaca, and Puebla. Next slide, please. Throughout my research, I question visibility. How do institutional frameworks, here specialty coffee market, state programs, and local organizations construct the visibility and value of labor, knowledge, and ecological care in smallholder coffee farming in Oaxaca? And how do these constructions shape sustainability practices and narratives? Next, please. It is a qualitative research, so data is mostly collected through a ethnographic fieldwork, which I am conducting now. Next, please. So my research area is Oaxaca. I have been working with and in different coffee villages in both northern and southern highlands in Oaxaca. Next slide, please. This is how coffee is grown in Oaxaca in agroforestry system. It is beautiful, isn't it? However, it also means that farmers have to walk for hours by foot to get to the farm, as most of them have no car or other means of transportation. It also means that they have to carry their harvest on their back. Oaxaca has very limited arable plain land for industrial type farming, and coffee allows them to produce profitable crops to sustain their lives and allows us to have high quality ecological coffee. Next, please. However, coffee, as one of the most traded commodities in the world, epitomizes the externalization of environmental and social cost. Invisibility is a structural condition. It is embedded in how markets operate, how development is measured, and how value is attributed. One example of biodiversity loss is the loss of coffee varieties caused by both climate change and market pressures, all human-made. Market demand make producers produce very specific varieties. Smallholder coffee farmers in the highland carry responsibilities to improve the quality, increase the yield, and build resilience, while many are paid low by intermediaries. My research aims to challenge the naturalization of invisibility in agricultural development and to foreground the people, practices, and places that capitalist logics would prefer to forget. Next slide, please. Global coffee sustainability frameworks increasingly claim to support ethical purchase and ecological farming. So far, there have been different schemes, such as organic coffee and fair trade. Now, specialty coffee is a newly rising dominant concept in the coffee industry. However, is specialty coffee a real solution to achieve fairness for smallholder producers? Fairness, not only fair price, but also fair treatment in general. I will navigate how specialty coffee discourse appears, manifests, and impact farmers, organizations, and government programs. Next slide, please. This is an example of specialty coffee. Specialty coffee is about traceability and visibility, but it is important to think about what is unspoken behind it. It is still highly ambiguous in many aspects, and the majority of smallholder producers have highly limited access to the market, leaving them marginalized. For example, in the specialty coffee market, fame and higher price are largely largely gained through contest and auctions, but is favorable for larger thinkers, not individual micro nano producers. Being able to participate in those contests actually is a privilege. So the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Next slide, please. My research is an effort to rethink about visibility and to make the invisible visible. It is an invitation to revise our approach to rural labor, care, and the market. Next, please. Thank you very much. If you have any question, please email me. I will be very happy to answer.
Thank you, Yaeji. I think we're going to start. We have a couple of questions for the ones who stayed. So maybe we can start with you directly, and we'll go to the others in a minute.
Hello, Yaeji. I would like to ask you, what are the most challenging parts of working in a very beautiful but sometimes isolated state like Oaxaca and its communities? So what's the hardest part so far for you? And also, what are the best parts too?
Perhaps I start with the best part. So honestly, I'm having my best time of the life in Oaxaca. Oaxaca definitely beautiful. The nature, biodiversity is amazing, absolutely. And people are heartwarming. They received me so well. And it's absolutely interesting. So I learned so much. I am learning so much here. So it's just everything's best and food, absolutely great. So I would say it's just in general in Mexico. And the challenging part. So one thing I could not expect before I came here to work in the villages is the logistics. So that will definitely be a part of my research as well. But the road, a large part of the road aren't paved or previously paved. So I travel quite a lot, and the closest coffee producing village in Oaxaca from Oaxaca city is about 4 or 5 hours far, and the farthest will take 9 to 10 hours. And there's no proper bus, but just small van. And because of the road system, cars aren't properly repaired, and roads are very rough. and in many cases there aren't many seat belts. So I found it quite challenging for me. It was very hard for me. I really wanted seat belt, but also because it's very dangerous. I think that was the most challenging part for me. So when I am in the village, it's just a paradise. Like I can't say paradise. It's beautiful. I really enjoy my time there, but to get there is quite rough.
Fair enough, but I guess that the food compensate that part. So I'm glad that you hear. I'm glad to hear that you're having a great time there. Thank you.
Yeah, and knowing this, we appreciate the effort to come here despite the difficulties. We're going to move on to a different question for Jimena, if you're there. We got the question on: would the direct consumption of pulque in its rural context have the same effects as what could be expected from the probiotics developed from it? Or do you think it's tied from its traditional form of consumption, those being detached at the time of developing a probiotic?
Yes, the question was about if about the consequences of using pulque from rural communities.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the way pulque is consumed in rural contexts, the positive effects it could have, could those be expected to be achieved in the same way from, let's say, the development of probiotic with those same properties, or are those benefits tied to the way it's traditionally consumed? Or could you replicate that artificially, let's say?
All right, yeah. So we can expect the same type of effects it has when pulque is consumed traditionally, because it's more about the bacteria that interferes in this type of like when we make a supplement of probiotic, we can expect the same type of results we have, because it's about the bacteria, because we use lactobacillus that it's mostly preserved from the strains that we use when isolating this type, because when the man rugosa sharp medium I'm using, we only are going to use, we're only going to have this lactic acid bacteria, and that makes us like allows us to have the best candidates from lactobacillus, so it will have the same use, we will have the same results as if we drink the pulque itself.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Thank you very much.
Going to the next questions, I'm going to start with Pablo. The OMVs that you're proposing come from a pathogenic organism. If you're trying to use this as a vaccine, how will you prevent this to cause any kind of risk to humans?
Right. Yeah. The content of the outer membrane vesicles depends on the bacteria and their environmental conditions. We will need to eliminate or attenuate the virulence factors or the genes, like resistant genes to antibiotics. To do this, you could perform a partial lysis of the membrane to introduce genes to by knockdown, silence these genes. Or other strategy is modifying the bacterial genes that encode the virulence factors. That can lead to a reduction in amount of these factors to package inside the OMBs. Or one is by manipulating the bacterial cell envelopes, it is possible to influence the composition of the outer membrane vesicles. Yeah.
Well, sounds promising. Hopefully the FDA will like it and approve it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's the last question for Gabriela. Gabriela, are you there?
Yes, Alex, I'm here. Thank you.
If you were to develop the vaccine in the real world and test it in humans, what technology will you use for its use?
Okay, I think. Can you repeat the question, please?
What technology will you use for vaccine development for Chagas disease?
Okay. I'm using recombinant proteins technology. That's that's the main reason I'm using chimeric peptides, and to fabric these peptides, we used Ecology, that is in DH5 alpha, this transformated Ecolis to produce our peptides of interest, and yeah, then prove it with marine models.
And why this technology and not others?
Well, using chimeric peptides is not that it doesn't present that cytotoxic effects than other kinds of vaccines, like the attenuated vaccines. And yeah, that's these peptides let us get into the specific region of the antigen that it will be recognized by the MHC1 and 2, and then we think that will promote the immune response Th1 and Th2.
Okay, well, hopefully that's going to be the case if you take these into further levels. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's all the questions for now. Some other participants have to leave, but I'm sure you can contact them, or we can give you the details if you have any questions for them. So thank you everyone for joining the call and for staying a bit longer, and for your efforts to connect from Mexico and different parts of the world. And thank you to the NAM UK Centre for Mexican Studies for hosting this, and to everyone in YouTube, and we may see this in the future. Thank you very much.